Content warning. This video contains disturbing real-life horror stories involving school lockdowns, armed intruders, and extreme psychological terror. This content may be inappropriate for viewers under 18 and those sensitive to fear-inducing material. If you are under 18 or easily frightened, please do not watch. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The Chamber. There are moments in life that split your timeline in two, the person you were before and the person you became after. For me, that moment happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in the basement of my high school. I was 16. I thought the worst thing that could happen to me that day was failing a quiz. I was wrong. Let me set the scene for you because the geography of this place matters. My high school in suburban Ohio was enormous. One of those sprawling public schools that seemed to grow a new wing every decade until it ran out of space above ground. And that's exactly what happened. When they couldn't build out anymore, they built down. Beneath the main building, carved out of what used to be a maintenance and storage area, were two basement classrooms. They had remodeled it to look somewhat normal, painted cinder-block walls, fluorescent lighting, standard school desks, but everyone knew it wasn't quite right. There was something about the air down there, heavy, still, like the building was holding its breath. We called it the Chamber. The Chamber had a reputation, and not a bad one. No intercom system reached down there, which meant no morning announcements, no interruptions, no random PA squeals mid-lecture. Teachers who held class in the Chamber tended to be more relaxed. The classes were easier. There was even a private bathroom, shared between the two rooms, that nobody else in the school could access. It was cool year-round, even in August, when the rest of the building baked like a brick oven. Everyone wanted a class in the Chamber. I had fifth period, astronomy down there, right after lunch, and on most days I genuinely didn't mind it. Our teacher, Mr. Holt, was one of those rare educators who actually made you feel like the universe was worth caring about. He'd dim the lights and put star maps on the projector, and for 45 minutes the weight of high school life would lift off your shoulders. That Tuesday, we had a quiz. I finished early, I usually did, and with 15 minutes still left in the period, I pulled out my phone under the desk and texted my friend Marcus, who was in the other basement classroom taking some kind of history elective. Marcus and I had been friends since middle school. He was the kind of guy who could find entertainment in literally any situation. I told him I was done and bored. He told me he was too. "Meet me in the bathroom," I typed. "Give me 2 minutes," he replied. I raised my hand, told Mr. Holt I needed to use the restroom, and slipped out into the small hallway that connected the two rooms. The bathroom was maybe 30 feet away. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. It smelled like old tile and industrial cleaner. 2 sinks, 3 stalls, a single flickering bulb above the mirror. Charming. Marcus showed up about 90 seconds later, grinning like he'd already thought of something stupid to do. We talked, made fun of teachers, quoted things from TV shows we'd been watching, normal 16-year-old stuff. And then Marcus glanced down at his phone and his expression shifted. "Dude," he said slowly, "someone just texted me. School's going on lockdown." I stared at him. He showed me the message. It was from a kid in one of the upstairs classes. Brief, panicked, no punctuation. "Lockdown happening, RN, stay where you are." We looked at each other. And then, and I'm not proud of this, we both started grinning. Here's the thing about being 16 and in a basement classroom with no intercom access during a school lockdown. Nobody knows where you are. Neither of our teachers had seen us leave. We were, for all practical purposes, invisible. The lockdown meant everyone was sealed in their classrooms, the hallways were empty, and for two dumb teenagers with nothing better to do, that felt less like a threat and more like an invitation. "We should go look around," Marcus said. "Absolutely," I agreed. We told ourselves the worst that could happen was we'd get caught and have to explain that we couldn't hear the announcement from the basement, which was completely true and completely reasonable. So we pushed open the heavy door at the top of the basement stairs, the one that opened into the main first-floor hallway, and stepped through. Every single light in the building was off. I don't mean dimmed, I don't mean flickering, I mean off, completely, totally, deliberately dark. The hallway stretched ahead of us like a tunnel, and the only light came from the distant glass doors at the front lobby, pale gray afternoon light, filtering through like fog. I'd been in that hallway hundreds of times. I knew every locker, every water fountain, every scuff on the linoleum. But in the dark, it was somewhere else entirely. "They never turn the lights off during lockdowns," I whispered. "Yeah," Marcus whispered back. Neither of us moved for a moment. Then Marcus stepped forward into the hallway, and I followed, because that's what you do when you're 16, and you haven't learned yet that some situations are worth walking away from. We'd only gone maybe 20 feet when Marcus stopped. "Hey," he said quietly. "Who's that?" I looked. At the far end of the hallway, maybe 60 or 70 feet away, a shape was moving toward us through the darkness, slow, deliberate. The way it moved wasn't right, not the purposeful stride of a teacher or administrator, not the hurried jog of someone responding to an emergency. It was loose, unhurried, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. As the figure got closer, details resolved out of the dark. A man, middle-aged, heavy coat despite the weather. His clothes were wrong in a way that was hard to articulate immediately, too layered, too mismatched, like someone who'd dressed in the dark or hadn't thought about it in a while. He wasn't a teacher, he wasn't staff, he wasn't anyone who belonged in that building. "Go," I said. We didn't run. Running would have made noise, and something told me we didn't want to make noise. We moved fast and quiet back through the basement door, pulled it shut behind us, and stood in the stairwell breathing hard. "Did he see us?" Marcus whispered. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." Both classroom doors were shut, lights off inside. The teachers had done everything right, pulled the shades, killed the lights, locked the doors. We couldn't knock without giving away our position to whoever was above us. We couldn't go back upstairs. We had one option, the bathroom. We went back inside. I hit the light switch. Immediately, darkness was better than the sliver of light under the door, and we moved to the far corner stall, the one farthest from the entrance. Marcus latched it. We stood on the toilet seat, feet up, so our legs wouldn't show under the stall door. Silence. Real silence. The kind you only find underground, where there's no wind, no traffic, no ambient hum of the world going about its business. Just the occasional drip from a faucet and the sound of our own breathing, which both of us were working very hard to control. I don't know how long we stood there. It felt like hours. It was probably 4 or 5 minutes. Then the bathroom door opened. Light from the hallway cut through the darkness for just a moment, a brief, searing rectangle, and then the door swung shut and we were in the black again. But someone was in the room with us. I could hear them. Footsteps on tile, slow and searching, moving toward our side of the bathroom. Then they stopped. And then, so close, it raised every hair on my body. I heard breathing, heavy, ragged breathing, like someone who'd been exerting themselves, or like someone who was very, very agitated. It was maybe 2 feet away from us, separated only by the thin metal of the stall door. Marcus leaned close to my ear. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "We have to crawl under to the next stall," he whispered. It was barely a sound, barely anything, a breath shaped like words, but the bathroom was so profoundly silent that even that whisper carried. The breathing outside the stall door stopped. Then a hand hit the stall door, hard, testing it, pushing it inward against the latch. And I didn't hesitate. "Go," I breathed. We dropped off the toilet and went flat to the floor in the same motion. The gap under the stall divider was maybe 8 inches, enough. Marcus went first, pulling himself through, and I followed, dragging myself across cold tile to the next stall, then the one after that. Behind us, the original stall door rattled harder, metal clanging against metal, and then there was a single massive impact, a shoulder or a foot, that made the whole partition shudder. We came out the other end of the row and hit the main bathroom door running. The light hit us like a wave, and in the second it took for my eyes to adjust, I caught a frozen image. The man from the hallway, standing at the far corner of the bathroom near the stall we'd just vacated, blinking in the sudden brightness. We pounded on the door of Marcus's classroom. The teacher, Ms. Chen, opened it in about 3 seconds flat and yanked us both inside. She locked the door before Marcus even finished his first sentence. He told her everything, and at the end, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned seeing something dark jutting from the man's jacket pocket, something that looked like the handle of a gun. I hadn't seen it. I honestly hadn't looked that closely. But the room's reaction told me everything. The students weren't laughing, and high schoolers will laugh at almost anything. They were sitting in a tight cluster in the corner of the room, knees pulled up, faces pale. Whatever they'd heard before we arrived, it was bad. Then the door handle moved. Slow at first, just a testing motion, the knob rotating slightly and stopping when it met the lock. Then a face appeared at the narrow window in the door, dark eyes scanning the room. The knob rattled again, harder. 3 heavy impacts on the door that made 2 girls cry out and made me step backward without thinking. Then it stopped. The face withdrew. Footsteps receded down the hallway toward the stairs. We sat in that room for over an hour. Ms. Chen spoke to us in a low, careful voice, asking questions, shaking her head slowly at our answers in the way that adults do when they're genuinely frightened but trying not to show it. Eventually her phone buzzed. She listened, then told us to line up single file. We came upstairs into chaos. Police vehicles, teachers directing students away from the building, parents already pulling into the lot, despite no official notification. A detective talked to Marcus and me for about 20 minutes, took our descriptions, and had us look at some photographs on his phone. I don't know if I identified anyone correctly. I don't know if they ever found him. What I do know is this: he was in that bathroom with us. And when Marcus whispered, he heard it. And everything that happened after was because of what he did with that information. I think about that gap under the stall sometimes. 8 inches, maybe 9. The distance between what happened and what almost happened. It's not a big gap. What the radio didn't prepare me for told from the perspective of a retired law enforcement officer with 22 years of service. I want to be careful about what I share here, for reasons that will become obvious. I spent 22 years working in law enforcement in the Pacific Northwest. Small. Cities, suburban counties, the kind of places where serious calls were rare enough that when they happened, they hit you differently than they hit officers in major metro areas. I'd responded to car accidents where I had to notify families. I'd worked overdoses. I'd been on scene for things I won't describe here. But the call I received on a wet Wednesday afternoon in November will never leave me. My unit got dispatched to a middle school. I won't name it, and I won't name the town, for legal reasons that are still ongoing. After staff reported a suspicious individual entering the building through a rear service entrance. The initial description was thin. Male, adult, no visible school affiliation, had been seen stepping out of a white cargo van parked behind the gym and entering through a door that was supposed to be locked, but apparently wasn't that day. I was the first unit to arrive. The parking lot behind the school was still mostly empty. School wasn't out yet. The white van was there, backed into a space near the service entrance, the kind of anonymous vehicle you see everywhere and never look at twice. I ran the plates before I got out of my car. They came back clean, registered to a plumbing supply company 3 states away. I noted the full plate number, which turned out to be the one thing I did right that afternoon. The back entrance was a heavy red door with a push bar. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped into a short service corridor. Concrete floors, metal shelving, the smell of industrial cleaning products and gym shoes. The overhead fluorescence had been shut off as part of the lockdown protocol, so I was working by flashlight from the moment I entered. I moved through the service corridor into the main gym hallway. My flashlight beam swept left and right, catching nothing. Empty bleachers, a trophy case, bulletin boards covered in construction paper artwork. I could hear the sound of the building settling around me, and somewhere distant, the muffled sound of students being moved through lockdown procedures, teachers talking in low voices behind closed doors. The front office was at the far end of the main corridor. I made my way there and found 3 staff members crouched behind the reception desk. The school secretary, a woman in her 50s who was doing an extraordinary job of staying calm, gestured me close and spoke quietly and directly. "He went toward the boys' locker room," she said. "He might have a weapon. Please be careful." I called for backup on my radio. Dispatch told me units were already en route. ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a long time. I went back the way I came. The boys' locker room was off the gym hallway, right next to the service entrance I'd come through. The door was a standard push-open with no window. I pressed my back against the wall beside it, listened for 10 seconds. Nothing conclusive, just the ambient hiss of a ventilation system, and went in. The darkness in that locker room was absolute. No windows, no exit signs, no emergency lighting. Just my flashlight cutting a cone through the black, catching rows of gray metal lockers on either side. The smell of old athletic equipment and mildew, the constant white noise of an HVAC vent somewhere above. And underneath it, something else. Sounds, small ones, rhythmic and irregular at the same time, a faint metallic tick-tick-tick, like something tapping against the inside of a locker door. It stopped and started, stopped and started. I moved toward it and it seemed to shift, coming from my left, then from ahead of me, then from my right. I told myself it was the ventilation system causing the metal to expand and contract. I was afraid in that locker room. I need to say that plainly, because I think there's a myth about what it feels like to be a trained officer in a threatening situation, and the myth says that training overrides fear. It doesn't. Training gives you things to do while you're afraid. My hands were steady, my breathing was controlled, and I was afraid. I worked my way to the far end of the locker room, where a doorless opening led into the football equipment room, a separate space with larger lockers, the kind built to accommodate full pads and helmets. I swept my light across it. Empty. Still. I came back through the main locker room, moving slower now, really listening. The tapping sounds had stopped. Then I heard something that made me stop completely. A sound that didn't belong anywhere in that room. A sound that was unmistakably human, breathing, controlled and deliberate, someone trying not to make noise. I made a decision. I stepped into the center of the room, squared my shoulders, and said it loud and clear, "This is the police. Identify yourself." For 2 seconds, nothing. And then a child's voice, muffled and terrified, from somewhere to my left. "Help! Please help me." I moved toward the voice, tracking it to a bank of lockers against the far wall. The voice was coming from behind the metal, from inside a locker. I told the kid I was right there, that I was going to get him out, to hang on. He pounded on the door from the inside. 3 heavy hits, and I could hear him crying now, trying not to, failing. I stood there for a moment and felt the full weight of what I was looking at. Then I turned and ran. Back outside into the parking lot, to where I'd noted the white van. It was gone. I won't describe what I felt standing in that empty parking space, knowing what I'd just missed, knowing what my failure to immediately secure that vehicle had cost. I called it in, gave the plate number, put out the description, requested every available unit, and then I ran back inside and got on my radio to have staff bring bolt cutters to the locker room. The boy was 12 years old. He was from a 7th grade math class. When we got him out of that locker, he was curled into himself in the way that children do when they've decided to make themselves as small as possible. Like if they get small enough, whatever's happening will stop being real. His left arm had a laceration from his wrist to his elbow. Shallow, more terrifying than life-threatening. But it was from a knife. He told us the man had come into a corridor where he was walking to the bathroom alone, grabbed him from behind, pressed a knife against him, and moved him through a service hallway to the locker room. He'd locked the boy inside when he heard my radio in the main corridor. The boy had been in that locker for over 20 minutes. The van was located 8 days later at a gas station about 40 miles east. The driver was identified through security footage and taken into custody after a 2-day operation involving multiple agencies. The charges that followed were serious, and the case made its way through the courts over the following 2 years. I retired 14 months later. I tell myself it wasn't because of that call. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. There's something I want you to understand, if you've never worked a scene like that. The fear that stays with you isn't the fear you felt in the moment. The moment has adrenaline, protocol, purpose. The fear that stays is the one you feel afterward, when you replay the decisions you made, when you count the seconds differently, when you think about how close every terrible outcome was, and how the distance between what happened and what almost happened was measured in things as small as a radio click or a plate number you almost didn't write down. I think about that boy often. I know he's in his 20s now. I hope he's okay. I hope he doesn't think about it the way I do. The closet. I was 18, senior year of high school, first time traveling alone, staying in a mid-range hotel chain in New Jersey while visiting a university I was considering attending. My parents couldn't make the trip. My dad had work obligations. My mom was dealing with a family situation. So I drove myself down on a Friday, checked in, attended a campus tour Saturday morning, grabbed lunch at a diner near campus, and was back in my hotel room by early evening. I was tired in the pleasant way that comes from a full day of walking and paying attention. I ordered room service, watched some TV, and was genuinely looking forward to getting a solid 8 hours before another campus visit the next morning. At around 9:15 p.m., an alarm began sounding in my room. It wasn't a fire alarm, no rapid beeping, no automated voice telling me to exit via the stairwell. This was different, a sustained, pulsing tone, accompanied by a white strobe light mounted in the upper corner of the room that I'd never noticed before, flashing at roughly 1-second intervals, and then a recorded message began playing on a loop, volume slightly lower than the alarm. Attention guests. The hotel is currently in a security lockdown. Please remain in your rooms and lock your doors. Do not open your door for any reason. Security personnel are responding. Thank you for your patience. I sat up in bed and stared at the strobe for a moment. A hotel lockdown. I hadn't known that was a thing. I should tell you that my first reaction, and I'm not particularly proud of this, was curiosity. I was 18, I'd grown up watching crime procedurals, and the idea of a real-life security situation in a place I was staying struck me as genuinely interesting rather than immediately threatening. I checked the lock on my door, secured, pulled back the curtain to see if anything was happening in the parking lot, nothing visible from my angle, and then sat back down on the bed. The alarm silenced itself about 10 minutes later. The strobe continued. The message kept cycling. Every 20 seconds or so, the same calm, careful, recorded voice reminding me to stay inside. I turned on the TV for background noise and went through my normal, getting ready for bed routine. Washed my face, changed, brushed my teeth, got into bed, clicked off the lamp. The strobe was still going in the corner, bright white, steady, relentless, like someone repeatedly turning on a light and turning it off again. I told myself I'd call the front desk in the morning if it was still running. I fell into that shallow half-sleep you get in unfamiliar places, not quite unconscious, aware of the strange pillow and the AC unit and the light pulsing every second through my closed eyelids. I watched some mindless TV, clicked it off, shifted positions. Then the room phone rang. It was on the nightstand, an old-fashioned handset style, the kind hotels kept as backup for guests without cell service. I'd used it once to ask about checkout time. I picked it up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was female, hotel staff, and she was working very hard to sound composed. I could hear the effort in it, the deliberate steadiness of someone who had been trained to stay calm, but was currently in a situation that was testing that training. "Mr. Daniels," she said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to stay calm, okay? Can you do that for me?" Everything interesting about the situation evaporated in that instant, because that sentence, "Stay calm, can you do that for me?" is not something people say when the situation is fine. "Yes," I said. "What's happening?" "I need you to quietly get up from your bed," she said. "Unlock your door and step out into the hallway. Can you do that right now?" "Why?" I asked. "What's in my room?" A half-second pause, and then, very carefully, "Sir, we believe there may be someone in your room with you. Please get up and leave right now." I dropped the phone. The next 10 seconds happened in a fragmented, hyper-aware way, the kind of slow-motion perception that adrenaline creates, where you notice things you shouldn't have time to notice. The hum of the AC, the strobe still, pulsing, the distant sound of the phone handset swinging against the nightstand. I stood up and looked. Under the bed, nothing, just carpet and a luggage rack. Bathroom, door open, light off. I reached in and hit the switch. Empty. And then I turned and looked at the closet. It was the kind of hotel closet that hotels everywhere seem to have agreed on as standard. A sliding wooden door, the kind that sits in a track and moves horizontally. It was set into the wall beside the bathroom, about 6 feet wide, full of hangers and a small shelf above them. The door was open about 2 inches, 2 inches of darkness between the door and the frame, and in that darkness, catching the strobe light for just a fraction of a second on each pulse, a face. I don't know how long I stood there. The brain does a strange thing when it encounters something that shouldn't be possible. It doesn't immediately accept what it's seeing. It runs through alternatives. That's not a face. That's a shadow. That's a trick of the light. And then the strobe pulses again, and the shadow resolves into something unambiguous, an eye, open and staring, and there are no more alternatives. The closet door slid shut, not fast, deliberately, the kind of motion that says, "I see you, and now you know I see you." I was out the door in one motion. I don't remember deciding to move. My body made the decision for me. The hallway was flooded with light. I stood there in bare feet on hotel carpet, in the clothes I'd gone to sleep in, and the door clicked shut behind me. There were 3 other guests in the hallway. All of them had come out of their rooms. All of them looked like I probably looked, half awake, confused, frightened. A hotel security officer was at the end of the hall, speaking into a radio. Within minutes, local police arrived. The hallway was cleared. I was taken to the lobby, given a cup of coffee I didn't drink, and asked to wait. About 40 minutes later, a detective came and sat across from me and explained what had happened. The front desk staff had been monitoring the hotel's internal camera system, which covered every floor corridor, when they noticed a man who had entered the hotel earlier that afternoon. He'd spent time in the lobby, moved through different floors, and had eventually acquired— the detective was careful about how he phrased this, given pending charges— gained access to a keycard for my room. The camera footage showed him entering my room at approximately 8:40 p.m. I'd returned from dinner at 8:15, which meant he had come into my room while I was in it. While I was watching television, completely unaware, a man had opened my door with a card that shouldn't have worked, and stepped inside. When they brought him out through the lobby, I was still sitting in the chair across from the front desk. He was in his 40s, shorter than I'd expected, wearing ordinary clothes that told you nothing about him. He had his hands secured behind him and 2 officers flanking him, and as they walked him past the lobby seating area, he turned his head and looked directly at me. Not at the room in general, not in my direction by coincidence. At me, specifically, like he knew exactly who I was, like he'd had nearly an hour to figure that out. I drove home the next morning. I never went back to visit that university. I chose a different school, farther away, for reasons I told myself were about the academic programs. I've stayed in hundreds of hotels since then. I always check the closet first, before I put down my bag, before I sit on the bed, before I do anything else. I slide that door all the way open on both sides, and I look at every corner, every single time. Some habits are born from curiosity, some are born from good advice, and some are born from standing in a dark room while a strobe light pulses, watching a closet door slide slowly, deliberately shut, and understanding, for the first time in your life, that the thing you thought only happened in movies had just happened to you. And now you're wondering, what would you have done? How long were you really alone in that room before you knew you weren't? Sleep well.